Savant and protesters briefly occupy Seattle City Hall as Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone grows. Several hundred demonstrators, led by Seattle City Council member Kshama Savant, occupied City Hall downtown Tuesday night for just over an hour, calling for the resignation of Mayor Jenny Durkan and the defunding of the Seattle Police Department after a march from the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. Protesters entered chanting "Whose City Hall? Our City Hall" before listening to a number of speakers at the People's Mic, as Savant called it, on a range of issues, from the importance of Black Lgbt and women in recent protests to taxing the council members' familiar foe. It is about building the kind of political representation that brings the voice of the people into the halls of power and grabs power for ordinary people, Savant said. Starting Wednesday, the City Council is going to be discussing budget issues, meaning two very important demands for us: defund SPD and tax Amazon. Many protesters also stayed behind to maintain a presence in the zone around 12th and Pine. Others spoke out saying the community, not politicians, should drive decisions around the camp growing outside the large police precinct emptied of equipment and boarded with plywood. So far, the boards have remained in place. At City Hall, after a song telling Durkan "You about to lose your job," another speaker decried Savant's co-optation of the movement to push her own agenda. "Please stop using Black Lives Matter for your political campaigns," the speaker said, also noting the whiteness of many speakers at recent protests. "I'm really sorry, I want to tax Amazon too, I want to do all these things too, but this is not a movement for you to be politically active, for you to be politically correct, and for you to gain all these votes. Please stop taking advantage of us." Savant also had critical words for her council colleagues, who she called corporate politicians and sellouts. "When I'm sitting on the dais, every moment I remind myself they're not my people, you're my people," she said on the steps up to the council chamber. Protesters left City Hall chanting "Defund SPD" and headed back east to Cal Anderson Park and the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, where protesters watched 13th, a documentary on mass incarceration, on a projector. A new sign hung outside the East Precinct that said this space is now property of the Seattle people. The impromptu peaceful visit comes just a day after the SPD ceded its East Precinct at 12th and Pine, where protesters created the chaz which continued to sprout Tuesday as demonstrators watched a documentary in the evening and filled the space with food and beverages. It also came after a 2-hour rally on the turf field at Cal Anderson Park, where an estimated 2,000 protesters gathered in the rain for a community meeting hosted by Savant in which about a dozen speakers from activists to religious leaders spoke. "What we've defeated here is the political establishment of this city," Savant said, referring to the victory of taking over the SPD's East Precinct and calling out gentrification in the city and police killings over the last decade. "Our fight is not just against the police, our fight is for systemic change." Kay Viking Garrett of Africatown Community Land Trust called on city leaders to pay the fee for centuries of unfair treatment. Several speakers called for the removal of the Seattle Police Officers Guild from the Milk Labor Council, and Reverend Robert Jeffrey of the New Hope Missionary Baptist Church talked of being stopped by police more than 50 times. "I've been hit in the stomach with batons, I've gone through everything and experienced the total demonic structures that is Seattle," said Jeffrey, who is Black. "What happened to George Floyd happens to Black Americans in this country every day." Jeffrey closed his remarks by repeatedly telling protesters to fight on. The weekend saw 2 straight nights of aggressive dispersal tactics from law enforcement, including the deployment of tear gas Sunday night, before the Seattle Police Department essentially abandoned its East Precinct on 12th and Pine that it had been guarding for a week, even leaving the front door open despite extensive fencing and wood panels covering the building. Savant arrived at the peaceful teach-in with minimal police presence Monday evening donning her tax Amazon mask and lauded the multi-racial solidarity of the movement against police brutality and called for a demilitarization of law enforcement. One protester grilled her on whether or not she would abolish the police before mocking her accent and having the crowd turn on him. She said police abolition was impossible in the current political system. "You can never have zero police and an elimination of racism and oppression on the basis of capitalism," Savant said at about 11 p.m. Monday night at the 12th and Pine intersection. Savant, who was at the front of another demonstration on Sunday after giving a speech a few hours earlier at another protest in Rainier Beach, said she was maced as tensions escalated that night. The next day, she introduced two pieces of legislation related to police handling of the protests. One would ban the use of all types of chemical weapons and the other would ban police from employing chokeholds. A list of demands has been published and has been shared widely by people on the ground and familiar with the reality of the situation in the Chaz. The 30-point list is posted here. It is high-minded. We demand the degentrification of Seattle, starting with rent control, and much of it will take years. Removing Mayor Durkin, Savant, and her office, should note, did not make the list. Though Durkin has remained silent on the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, the city has not abandoned Pike/Pine. In a press release that came in the midst of the City Hall protest titled "City Takes Steps to Create Safe Place for Peaceful Demonstrations," Durkin's departments list off their efforts to help. The Seattle Fire Department's, SFD, mission is to save lives and protect property. Recognizing that the Seattle Police Department, SPD, East Precinct is adjacent to residential and commercial buildings, SFD has and may continue to upstaff resources near the area to ensure crews are appropriately equipped to respond to fires and medical emergencies when it's safe to do so. Several city departments have taken steps to improve access to the area for fire apparatus should an emergency occur. Additionally, with recent intentionally set bonfires, dumpster fires, and attempts at structure fires, the department shared information on arson awareness and steps businesses and residences in the vicinity can take. To help keep the area safe and clean, Seattle Department of Transportation, SDOT, is picking up debris and trash, has cleaned graffiti that displayed hate, racist, and vulgar language or concepts, and has arranged for garbage cans and portable toilets to be placed in the vicinity for use by demonstrators. Streets are closed from 10th to 13th on Pine and on 11th between Olive and Pike. In an effort to improve site access for firefighters and prevent arson fires in dumpster receptacles, Seattle Public Utilities, SPUR, cleaned and or removed 50 dumpsters or carts from the area in the last 24 hours. To keep the area cleanly, waste pickup for businesses and protesters is ongoing, and daily debris removal efforts from the right-of-way continue. SPUR crews continue to assist with graffiti abatement and proactive and reactive board-up of windows. In addition to SPR facilities, there are currently at least 12 portable toilets in the vicinity. To keep Cal Anderson Park a safe and cleanly gathering area, the Parks Department, SPR, is helping with garbage and debris cleanup, weeding and tree trimming, repair of damaged garden beds, and removal of graffiti. The department has also worked to repair damaged fencing and bathrooms, and is providing support for boarding up local businesses. An artist has been brought in to create a mural at the park. Lights at Cal Anderson will stay on until 4 a.m. to keep the area well lit. To help inform local small businesses of the city's efforts and what to expect with regards to first responders operations, the Office of Economic Development, OED, canvassed area businesses. Tonight, the Seattle Police Department will continue to answer 911 calls throughout the city, including those serviced by the East Precinct. Last night's decision to take down the barricades and allow protesters to freely move in and around Capitol Hill was an important step in the city's efforts to lead with de-escalation and rebuild community trust, it reads. The city is committed to creating a safe space for peaceful demonstrations, and will also take steps to minimize property damage or potential injuries. The role of SPD in all of this remains murky. Overnight, officers responded to a lighter than normal night of calls. But there were also moments of confusion. Around 9 p.m., a dispatch request to check out a report of a possible fire being started in an alley was met with unusual response from police. That appears to be in the New Republic of Capitol Hill, a police officer responded. They can handle that. 20 minutes later, after reports of the exchange spread, officers were again dispatched and reported to the scene. By the time they arrived, police learned the 911 caller had taken things into her own hands, using a fire extinguisher to put out the small fire and spray away the alleged perpetrator. Update 1:25 p.m. In the first public comments from a city official following the exit of police officers from the East Precinct, Assistant Chief Deanna Nolet said the building has not been abandoned. In a brief, 10-minute appearance with media, Nolet said SPD had not pulled officers out of the area, only removed the department's visible presence and boarded up building. If the East Precinct were to catch on fire, there is a possibility the fire could spread and a very real possibility that those businesses and residents would be affected, Nolet said of the blocks near 12th and Pine. The assistant chief reiterated the explanation given by Chief Best and the mayor that a threat of burning down the building identified as credible by the FBI drove the decision to lock down the building and that the safest plan was to secure the structure. Nolet said SPD is working to identify those responsible for the threats and that the department remains dedicated to working with peaceful protesters. SPD says its officers also did not accompany Tuesday night's march from Capitol Hill to City Hall because it was peaceful and did not warrant law enforcement presence. While Nolet's words will hopefully be reassuring to those concerned about a lack of police presence around Capitol Hill and the Central District, CHS reported on overnight East Precinct radio dispatches in which calls near the protest zone were sometimes declined by officers. The assistant chief said the department is planning to hold daily briefings on the situation. Wednesday's session took place downtown at SPD headquarters far from the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone.